What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Thursday, everybody. Okay, today is October the 2nd. Something horrible happened in my country back in 1968. So I want to remind people of what happened. During the time of Octavio Diaz Ordaz's ruling, there were a number of things that happened in a short span of time between the 60s and 1970. There were the Olympic Games in 1968, and then there was the FIFA World Cup in 1970. Something else was happening back then, and it was a worldwide phenomenon. There was an anti-war and anti-establishment mass protests going on in France, in the United States, in Mexico, and one of the most horrible crimes committed in Mexico's history happened on October the 2nd, 1968. It's called Movimiento del 68. And it happened that a bunch of students from different universities in the city of Mexico were protesting the government at the time. And a number of people with white globes and guns started agitating the army of Mexico during that protest. And as a result, there were a bunch of casualties of students that passed away because they were murdered by the Mexican army. And this is one of the darkest moments in Mexico's history. And I just want to remember that on this day, and on a somber episode too, because part two of the interview with Dylan Borland happened today. I don't know if Jeremy Corbell wanted to make sure that everything that he was going to redact was redacted at the beginning of the episode because it was a live premiere. It started with some sound glitches. A lot of people couldn't hear the episode properly. All you had to do was refresh. Everybody who did realized that that was all that was needed, and the episode went on uninterrupted. And it was a really somber episode, as I'm telling you. For starters, there were many things that Dylan Borland talked about. He talked about having communications with people who had access to classified data and information from way back when that described the intention of these alleged NHI. And this is like a trope that has been prevalent since I started looking into this. There's a part of the UFO community of researchers that think that this phenomenon is not negative, is positive. There's a part of the UFO community and researcher community that thinks that they're ambivalent. And there's a part of the UFO community and researching community that thinks the NHI are actually negative for humanity. And that's one part that Dylan Borland talked about. Another part that he talked about was, and I think that he's talking about former Senate staffer Kirk McConnell, because he describes going to a Senate staffer and talking about some of the names that he thought were gonna create an effect, and they did on this Senate staffer. And this is a Senate staffer that in the interview, it is relayed that they respect him and they like him. And one of the people that has been the most vocal about this is Kirk McConnell. So I think they're talking about Kirk McConnell here. And the first video that I'm going to show you is about what they did to Dylan Borland. They actually tried to take his life. They cut off his brake lines right when he was trying to resign from his position. He had been working at BAE Systems for 3.5 years, and he couldn't get out of that position that he wanted to get out of. And when he was able to be transferred, he was transferred, and then he put his 2 weeks notice. And at the time that he was going out, somebody cut off his brakes and he totaled his car. He was fortunately not killed in the event, but when the investigating officer approached him to tell him about what happened, Dylan thought that he was going to be prosecuted because he was responsible for a car crash. And the investigator told him that the only reason he wasn't going to be prosecuted is because his lines were cut off. So they tried to take his life because they considered him a liability and a danger for the program because he knew too much. let me show you first when they cut off his brakes so you can see the extent of what they do to people who come forward, like Dylan.
It's like, I've been here for 3.5 years. I cannot do this anymore. This work is killing me. This is insane. This is the worst place on planet Earth. And I go to his boss and I walk in there. I say, here's my name. Here's my social. Look me up in JPass and Scattered Castles because I guarantee I'm not in there. And verbatim, he says to me, he says, there's no way you wouldn't be allowed in the building. I was like, you want to bet? He looks me up and he says, oh, wow, you haven't had a clearance since 2014. He gets on I give him other names of people who were in similar situations. And he gets on a phone call and he makes a call and he says, fix this now. I walk out of the building and magically my clearance pops up in JPass and Scattered Castles that morning. I get a phone call from BAE System Security and they're not happy with what I did. I take the first job I can, which was teaching counter UAS, so counter unmanned aerial surveillance vehicles at JIDO, which became DITRA. And long story short, I come into work a couple weeks later and I say, here's my 2-week notice. I'm out of here. They're like, oh, well, what can we do to keep you? I was like, there's absolutely nothing you can do to keep me. They're like, all right. They're like, you got to out process. Well, before 2 weeks, I'll process in a few days. I go and I'll process early. And as soon as I sign the paperwork, I walk out of the office and the company that hired me contacts me and they say, your clearance has been erased again. So I lose my clearance in May. That's May of 2018. The company that hired me went to their prime, which was at that point CACI, CACI. And for about a month, they are working, at least they're telling me they're working on getting my clearance fixed. And in early mid-June, I am contacted by the company that hired me and they said, we are unable to get your clearance back in the system. We have to move on to other candidates. Good luck out there. We don't think you're ever gonna get your clearance fixed. That night I was invited out and I was getting ready to sell my vehicles. I had pulled my 401k at this point because I knew I was done. I had filed for unemployment, which they denied me for. And on the way home, I totaled my car and there was a police investigation. And the police had told me in confidence that my brake lines were cut. They wanted it to look like a suicide, which goes into what the VA was doing with me and the medical issues and the doctors that had resigned and all that.
So you leave somewhere you were at. Next thing you know, you're pushing your brake to the floor, total the car, but you're able to get home.
Yep.
And you get home, and then of course the police see the car totaled, and they either wonder, were you sober? Is everything okay? And you invite them over. You said, come do a breathalyzer.
Yep.
They said, well, it's going to take a while.
Yep.
We're going to contact you tomorrow. And then the lead investigative officer in that case physically comes to your home.
Yep.
And warns you that somebody tried to kill you. Your brake lines were cut.
He verbatim said, the only reason I'm not charging you with a crime is because your brake lines were cut.
I'm not charging you for a crime because your brake lines were cut.
That's wild. What do you think about that? Yeah, that happened. Then let's go to the moment when he spoke to this Senate staffer, who I think might be Kirk McConnell. Don't quote me on this. I'm just guessing here. And just so you know how he reacted when Dylan started spilling some beans.
I get connected to Senate staffers and they are asking me questions and I tell them I have witnessed a triangle at Langley Air Force Base, but I have direct, in-depth knowledge of a hell of a lot more. And I am not comfortable sharing that over the phone. And as long as I am legally allowed to come to you, I will be there as soon as you will let me. And I go into meet with staffers.
We know who you testified to, and it's not, it's somebody who's has a high responsibility when it comes to this subject as far as intake and protecting whistleblowers. And when that person was in position, which they're not anymore, they did a great job.
That does sound like Kirk McConnell, doesn't it?
They did. I wish nothing but the best for them. I loved those people, all of them. It upsets me and I had suspicions because I, again, have been through what I've been through and I can kind of recognize when people are being toyed with, that towards the tail end, they were definitely being played with. And that was my concern. And I think they recognized I knew it and they tried to alleviate it on me. But I wish nothing but the best for them.
You told them pretty much everything, or did you hold some of it back?
I held a lot back. I had gone in, they had scheduled my meeting. There were 4 of them in the room.
You gave them program names, locations, the nature of the propulsion systems, everything.
I gave them my direct knowledge of the triangle, my direct knowledge of that entire event, and then guaranteed factual, no argument about it, a legacy program in detail with technology integration, how it works, where it's at, the whole kit and caboodle.
So they know.
What's the reaction? How did they react? Do they take it seriously, or are they?
Well, my 2 favorite moments is the one gentleman that we know was absolutely excited, and he was
Maybe that's Kirk.
very much like, it's like, okay, let me hear more. There's another one that is public now, who I don't think he really wanted to believe it, and had made some comments here and there. And then towards the tail end, I had dropped 2 magic words. And when those 2 magic words dropped, I will never forget it. As soon as those 2 words dropped, that individual's mouth hit the floor. He threw his hands in his hair, looked at me, literally looked down at the paper he was writing notes on, and exasperated an agency name, and was just like staring off into space like, what the hell am I supposed to do now?
Was it a program name?
Yes.
2-word program name?
Yep.
Something
Immaculate Constellation, maybe?
you should not know. Something you should not know.
Probably. But at this point, it is what it is.
But that they based on the reaction they knew.
100%.
Whew. Okay. And then this is when he talks with the person that knew a little more about the intent of these things. Shout out to Neil Goodman from Neil Goodman News, and shout out to Avi M, who also posts a lot of stuff about UAP.
Any thoughts on this? And this is one of the other things I came into knowledge of while at my work at DITRA before I lost my job. When Congress passed the archives legislation, where all the agencies were supposed to round up all their documents, I had a wonderful conversation on my last day, and I'm sure it was just coincidental. The person in charge of collecting all of the information from DITRA dealing with extraterrestrials, and as he put it, quote unquote, little green men, happened to sit next to me at my computer terminal and began pulling all of the documents on my system and the systems in our skiff. Interesting fact for you was that he came into the old atomic energy documents from way back when, and there was intelligence and information in those that discuss what you said, which is this has been around with them, and that even back then they had a similar outlook that this isn't exactly for our benefit. You know, you get into, and again, I don't want to go too woo. I want to really avoid the woo, but we're going into hypotheticals, and I try to keep all options open. You're right. Theoretically, they don't have to come here. I mean, we're working with Neuralink, we're projecting thoughts, we're doing all of this, dreams, you have MK Ultra, you have all of this stuff throughout the history, and all of our intelligence agencies never get rid of that capability. They only get better at it, and they only get better at hiding it. But if somebody's able to put a thought in your head, George, and tell you build this craft, yeah, you're the one who built it, but the thought came from somebody else. And now you start to get into places that are purely hypothetical, and I'm not even saying I believe them, but it's clear there's something to this.
And this goes a lot into what we've been discussing for a little bit here now about this intent and John Keel's work and Jacques Vallée's work, and how we're a farm, essentially. We're resources for whatever those things are. Dylan is now telling you that this is like the general outlook that governments have, the ones that do have access to this information of what we're dealing with. I don't know what you guys think about that, but 2 more things before we leave. Dylan Borland did confirm that he was not one of the 40 witnesses that David Grush discussed at the 2023 hearing. He was a separate one. They've already met at this point, and I do believe that David Grush does support Dylan Borland fully. And I just want to tell you guys, Dylan is just one of many who have information of this caliber. They have receipts, some of them have really compelling evidence, video, material, and they're coming out. And even though the hearings did not help the UAPDA pass, it did confirm that some people from Congress are being intimidated, and because this is very serious, and it encouraged more people to come forward. I'm talking to some other people from different news outlets are also talking to others, and for me, the best approach is dual here, because there are some whistleblowers like Dylan Borland who felt cornered in many ways because their livelihoods were threatened. They attempted to take his life. A lot of things happened to him, and he is using this as a last resort. And this is like the last thing we want, for these people to come forward publicly. But when it's necessary, it's necessary. But the ideal scenario is for people to not ever meet more of these people, and whatever goes on in the background, that's enough to help them get their lives back together and get to the truth, because they all want the same thing. They want for this to be uncovered. And it is difficult because they've talked about this in this episode, that most of them are patriots. They don't want to endanger national security, all of this, right? But there's also a fear factor of, it's really hard for people to digest the whole truth of what's going on. And it has to do with this. It has to do with the intent. And it has to do with a long history that has gone through millennia of these things interacting with humanity. And there's ancient scripture that talks about it. There's hidden history from, for example, the Smithsonian that talks about a lot of this. There's a lot of hidden history in archaeology that talks about this. And with that in mind, I do want to show you the last part from Dylan Borland in this interview, because he discusses what he thinks is going on, his opinion of what is going on based on the documentation that he's read and all the prep work that he's done since that day when he first saw that triangle, and all the information that he's been privy to subsequently. And this is what he said. Let me share this with you. So George Knapp asks the question because he's one of those people that has been at it for 50 years or more, and he doesn't know what's going on. And he's spoken to people high up in the government who have no idea exactly what's going on. They know a lot of things, but they don't know exactly what's happening. And he throws it to Dylan to answer the question. And this is what he said.
Let's talk about big picture. What does it mean? What's this whole story mean? Because, we've been pretty far up the food chain with people who've been at it for a long time at high levels, high security clearances, worked in programs. They all have guesses, but I don't know a single one of them that knows for sure what it is.
I will give my opinion. This is my opinion, knowing what I know for a fact, reading and coming into contact of information that I believe to be true, looking at history and looking at through my perspective. I think what we are dealing with is very, very, very old. I think old humans have written those down in religious stories. I think that it's quite clear that we have been influenced by something else. I think Arrow has been telling the American public the truth, and you have said this on Weaponized on my behalf, which is Arrow's statement, there is no scientific evidence of extraterrestrials, is 100% technically true. You have to have a control to have scientific proof, and extraterrestrial is a very exact statement and word with an exact definition, an entity of another planet. These things, whatever they are probably what are referred to as gods or demons or angels or jinn, or insert whatever cultural or religious perspective you have. There are probably also extraterrestrials. It's not a one size fits all. And considering, humanity has the same stories across many cultures: a flood, crafts that are in the sky, things that are coming and helping humans. And I'm at an advantage and a disadvantage knowing certain information that relates very clearly to things that are around the world that are related to what I know. I don't think that's by pure coincidence or luck. I think that the people that are in these programs know the truth to this stuff, and they are looking at it through a lens of this is true, this is true, this is true. This has been here for 8,000 years. This has been here for 4,000 years. Oh, we dug up this at an archaeological dig in hypothetically Egypt. You know, I mentioned it to you guys last night. Lakatsky in his statement about his faith and what it means to be human and the impact and nothing to fear. You know, Lakatsky and I are both Catholics, but I want to be clear in that it's the idea of something greater than us that is here with us and can influence us. And Pasalka talks about this, and you get into consciousness, and all of these things are so correlated, and that's a problem with this subject. And that's why one of the things that I'm a huge proponent of, going back to having our government be a part of this, is you have to set a foundation. Because if you come out and you throw it all out there, people are going to laugh at you. They're going to call you crazy. They're going to do X, Y, and Z. And you have to set a foundation. And I understand the UFO fanatics are not going to like this opinion, but this isn't for you. This is for the public. If you want disclosure, the public has to be a part of it. Hence why I'm here, is to hopefully get enough people outside of this subject agitated, upset, and come and say, no, we're done with this. My big picture idea is it's been here for a very long time. It goes by many names. It's many different things, and it has an influence on all of us.
And this is something that I've been pondering for a little while. Just yesterday, I was talking to some people within the movement who are more savvy on the legal aspects of this. And there is like an internal debate right now going on because some people within the movement don't think that people like Dylan or Matthew Brown or David Grush going public is good for the movement. And I understand where they are coming from. I know that doing it all in public, it's not helpful in many ways. But I also think that, as Dylan states here, we do need to get that broader attention from the people. And right now, and I'm sad to say this, but right now, less than 5% of the population is paying attention to a lot of this. I mean, over half of them are aware that UFOs are a thing because of science fiction, because of movies, because of popular culture. UFOs, aliens are one of the most popular things that exist. But the majority of people who think of them, they don't think they're real. They think they're science fiction or psyop. And we have to change that. And I think that there needs to be a dual effort, as I said, of people who are coming forward like Dylan, who get the support from the people and understand how serious and grave the situation is. And we also need people who are working in the background on all of this, that are never public, that don't go forward with their stories to the media. I think we need both. And another thing that I agree with him that I talked about yesterday is that this reticence to the definitions of what these things are, when it gets religious, I know that there's a lot of reticence there. And Dylan said it himself, just as I told you yesterday. We need sort of like a default definition of what's going on that doesn't rock people's beliefs when they hear them. Because for me, in my example, I'm agnostic. I'm not a religious person. So when I hear the term demon or jinn or angel, that already predisposes me to reject the term or the idea. And this happens to everybody. Whenever they hear a term or a definition that doesn't fit their own narrative or their own interpretation of reality, that's when we get these issues. And that's why there's a lot of people that hear that and they instantly reject it. And we need something more defaulty so we can all agree on these things being real and these things interacting with people for millennia. It's really enraging seeing how Dylan Borland has been treated, but he is just one of many who have been treated like this or worse. So keep that in mind. Whenever you want to throw out an accusation or trying to disparage someone or slander someone who's brave enough to come forward and talk about this, think about how it doesn't really make sense. Why would they lose their anonymity saying these things, fully knowing that there's going to be debunkers and people who are always denying everything they say and taking credit away from them? Why would they subject themselves to something like that? You know, and I know that there's a lot of frauds there. I know that there's a lot of people that just want to monetize and sell books, and they don't really care about the truth. They just care about selling their IP. I get that. That is a thing. And we do have to be aware of this. But you guys need to learn how to identify when someone really is struggling and really has gone through hell to tell you information like this. And you got to learn to identify when somebody like Clockwork speaks up against these people with an agenda. We need to learn how to identify that as well. So yeah, it's pretty enraging how he's been treated, how they tried to take his life, how they've ignored him. They kept him in limbo when it comes to work. They took away his clearance. They blacklisted him essentially. And he's still brave enough to come forward like this as a last resort. So we have to respect that. And yeah, when it comes to that veteran on veteran debate, I do think that we need to be careful when it comes to the VA, because Dylan spoke about what they did to him there. Clearly, there's people within the VA that don't have the best interest of veterans at heart. So we have to be careful of that. And if that's happening with the VA, there's also probably veterans who are already aware of it. But yeah, more people are going to keep coming forward. You can be damn sure about that. And yeah, there's going to be resistance, as there always is. But we needed to hear this from Dylan. Let me know what you think in the comments about the entire episode. I'm going to leave it in the description, of course. And what do you think about what's been happening to Dylan all this time? Let me know in the comments. There's another part of the episode where he talked about somebody from Counter Intel. That is a separate episode that I'm going to do. But for now, I will leave you. Thank you. And I'll be reading you in the comments. If you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That's all you need to do in order to help us. And it is what helps us the most. So thank you. But if you want to support us in other ways, there's a few links down there you can choose from. You can become a member on YouTube, or you can support us through KJRA. Anything you choose to do is always appreciated. So thank you. And that's it for me today on this video, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, stay curious and inquisitive like Dylan Borland always. Bye.